Everyone, I'm Phil Albertelli, and this is the Week in Doubt episode 270. Very special episode, an actual interview episode, or maybe more of a conversation. Haven't brought you guys one of those in a while. And I have from the Free Thought Profit podcast. I didn't butcher that, did I?
No,
Nope.
no, you're good.
I have John Hamill, all the way from Ireland, and I have You just go by Seamus?
Yeah.
The one and only Seamus, which is a conspicuously Irish name as well. And I just finished recording an episode of their podcast with them. They're very gracious to have me on. We talked about nuclear war and Satanism and Krampus. It was a very dark yet festive and enjoyable chat. And I hate the word chat. Don't know why I just used it. I was drinking rum and coke from my Krampus mug during that whole recording. So,
Well, we've got a national stereotype to live up to, so
Oh, yeah.
we're on Mr. Jameson's finest podcast juice.
That's it.
And so, judging by your name, Seamus, I guess all of us are at least part Irish here.
Yes. Yeah, I'm
We're
actually
all
Irish.
American. We're all-
Unfortunately, I'm just stuck in America. So.
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, I was going to do some shout-outs and corrections, but screw that. It's more important talking to you guys, I think. So, I'll kind of turn the tables. You guys had me give you a little bit of my bio,
Sure.
how I came to be an atheist, the nature of my upbringing, was it religious. John, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I think my background isn't all that different from yours, Phil. My parents were both remain very devout Catholics. I'm the eldest of 5 children, so my 4 siblings, I think, are both, are all still Catholics of various levels of piousness and devoutness. Yeah, I think the reason that I moved away from the faith was really I just stopped believing that it was true. I had lots of doubts about different aspects of the doctrine, and like so many atheists, I eventually made my mind up when I read the Bible. So it was. I know he wasn't the first to say it, but he was the first that I heard saying it. It was an interview with Penn Jillette, and he was talking about his atheism, and he recommended to anyone who was having doubts at a time when I was having doubts that the best thing to do is just go and pick up the Bible and read it. I was a little lazy. I just read the 4 Gospels, and that was enough. So yeah, I found it to be mostly dull and boring, and in various parts incredibly immoral. So yeah, that's not really consistent with what you would expect for the only book in the world to be authored by the omniscient, omnipotent creator of the universe. It was one of the shittiest books that I've ever read. So yeah, that's what finally made my mind up.
All right. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say, yeah, Penn Jillette came to mind. Yeah, if you want to make someone an atheist, have them read the Bible or whatever.
Yes, I think Mark Twain has a similar quote, and
Yeah, I think you're right.
Isaac Asimov has a similar quote. But well, maybe I'm a bit of a Philistine, but I like Penn Jillette, so he was the first guy that I heard say it.
I've tried to read the entirety of the Bible. I think I had to read the New Testament when I was, in Sunday school, CCD. But I've tried to start from the beginning of the Old Testament, go all the way. I end up cheating as soon as I come up to the genealogies. So and so.
Oh yeah.
So and so begat.
Yeah.
Dry as burnt toast, man. That is horrible. I always
For
end up
sure.
skipping beyond that. Okay, but Seamus, how about you? How did you come to be an atheist? What kind of upbringing did you have, religion-wise?
Well, both my parents were very much, stuck in the whole you have to go to church thing growing up. For the most extreme reasons that I'm not going to get into, they both left the church, but still held on to their own faith and decided whenever that they were going to have children, they're just kind of probably the most liberal move by them as far as that goes, to kind of let the kids pick. Definitely gave us, that is, the golden rule and the very watered down version of God created Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, the golden rule of Jesus, blah blah blah. That was pretty much what we had. Never was forced to go to church. Never went to a church, but always knew that there was somebody, a sky daddy above us to keep an eye on us and all that stuff. Once I got older, I started, kind of decided, well, this was something I needed to do. Right, I needed to get in touch with those things and find out. It was also kind of like why mom and dad left the church, kind of thing. Got married, first mistake, and yeah, we decided we were going to, both of us had a kind of similar backgrounds on that, and we were both going to try to decide, well, let's go to a church so we have a foundation because we wanted a family. And we became members of the Church of Christ, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Church of Christ, but it's like slightly a tier down or two from Westboro. So, yeah, not Catholicism, very Protestant, but very. This is our church. If you don't believe our church, you go to hell.
Like
a lot of
hates fags.
exactly, yeah. But we won't call them fags here, although wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? Say no more, right? So we had a bit of that. So I went along for the ride, drank the Kool-Aid for a long time. Then I died. I literally died in the hospital. I'm doing the short version. Trust me, that's a whole other story. Basically, when I died, I didn't see God.
No.
Didn't see. I didn't see the white light. Didn't see a lot of things that you expect.
No card with a number on it up on top of the.
No, basically it was like two linear planes, and I mean geometrically linear planes running into each other. Kind of very like imagine if the 2001 Kubrick film was in black and white. I guess.
Wow. Okay.
That little, but instead of going this way. There's a better way to explain it, but that's, again, I'm making the short version. So anyways, didn't see God, kind of questioned myself. After that, I went back and forth with my faith, and actually, believe it or not, whenever I really decided, well, I need to devout myself to God and really be stronger in my faith and, really believe this shit and, read it and all that stuff is when it started to really fall apart. Because it just doesn't hold water when you look at it hard. It started falling apart. I was going through divorce. That helped too in ways. Anyways, again, like John, read the Bible. And whenever I'm reading the Bible, I came across a film called The God That Wasn't There, which featured the mythicists that we know, Price and Carrier. I don't think Fitzgerald was in that film. But their arguments really rang true with me, being a lover of history and stuff. I was like, so if there's no Jesus, there was never a Jesus, then this book really falls apart. Not even just on its own merits, which it was literally before my eyes. When you're trying to read it, like he said, like John said, whenever you're like objectively reading it, it just falls apart. So historically, if there's nothing to back that up, then again, what is there? And that pretty much did it for me. I think from talking to you in the previous episode, started becoming a little bit of a seeker. I've actually been more of a seeker now, but that's another topic. Objectively seeking, because I wasn't allowed to let myself look at those things, right? Because I was, a child of God, so I couldn't let those things, come into my life. But I did, I did a very scary view of things once I got out and let myself do it and said, yeah, there's nothing else. This just us. So that's the short version. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Well, no, that's that's fascinating. And the thing about, you mentioned the God who wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's funny. I sometimes about how, ironically, I think one of the things that eroded my faith was watching religious documentaries. And not,
Oh yeah.
and not like documentaries that were meant to bash religion, but I think they were kind of like celebrating religion and approaching it from a scholarly viewpoint. I think two of them are. Frontline had a great special called "From Jesus to Christ: The First Christians." It was like a four-part series, and then there was another one called "Christianity: The First 1,000 Years," followed by the second 1,000 years, and they had people like Dominic Crossan and people like that
Yeah.
on there. And I think I used to watch Mysteries of the Bible too. I remember specifically they had a
Yes.
special called "Who Wrote the Bible," and they talk about, it's always stuck with me, the phenomenon of doublets. How there's parts in the Old Testament where the same story is repeated twice, but the facts differ. Like the amount
Right.
of animals allowed on the ark, the order of creation in
Mm.
Genesis, and sometimes these doublets are right on the heels of the other one. It's almost like they didn't know how to decide which version to put in, so one's kind of sloppily on the heels of the other one.
Yeah.
And some people will try to harmonize that, apologists, etc. But yeah, and so I think it was learning that the Bible was this kind of stitched together anthology written by different people at different times, and there were different versions of the same story. And then some of these stories may have been based on earlier Mesopotamian stories, like you have the
Gilgamesh.
yeah, exactly, the epic
Yeah.
of Gilgamesh, um, and the Atrahasis and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so fascinating. I love it. Like, not a day of my life probably goes by that I don't think about religion, and and yet I can't believe literally, but I still find some of these stories incredibly fascinating, and I look at them the same way I might look at mythology. But I think when they really become ugly is when you try to, or you insist on taking them literally. If you try to take the story of Noah literally, or Adam and Eve, you run into problems immediately. You have God condemning all of humanity because two people ate the wrong kind of fruit, or you have God changing his mind about creation, so causing a global genocide. And it doesn't hold together really.
Which is what every Christian does nowadays.
Yeah, it's kind of a cafeteria Catholic approach.
Yeah.
Try to decide which part you're going to take figuratively, which part's supposed to be literal. Then even Jesus, when you try to wrap your head around that one, it's like God gave himself to himself as a sacrifice to get rid of original sin, which I guess he could have somehow prevented, or it's just it gets very convoluted.
That's true. Yeah, and I think you're right also, Phil, in relation to literalism. I have been chastised more than once by a Catholic priest for interpreting the New Testament literally. I think the last thing I was talking to him about was fig trees. Jesus hates fig trees. He cursed a fig tree seemingly for no reason. And the priest admonished me to say, well, it wasn't a literal fig tree. Of course, you're interpreting this very important story much too literally, and you shouldn't be such a biblical literalist. But of course, they're all literalists when they decide to be. You could say, "This is my body. This is my blood." It's pretty weird to take that bit literally, but of course the Catholic priest insists on taking that bit very literally.
If you yank that last linchpin out, the whole thing falls apart. The whole card
That's right.
falls apart, So they
That's
have
right.
to. I mean, everything hangs on, no pun intended, the crucifixion. But yeah, if you yank that one last linchpin out, the whole. So they feel kind of comfortable deciding that whatever offends their moral sensibilities or whatever's not in keeping with a modern viewpoint, that can be figurative. But Jesus, that's got to be literal. And that reminds me of, he's infamous, William Lane Craig. But
Yes.
there's a debate between William Lane Craig and this, I think might be an Episcopalian but a bishop named Shelby Spong. And I read a book of his when I was a kid, ironically given to me as a gift by a very devout Catholic friend, called Liberating the Gospels. And he takes a very figurative and symbolic approach to the New Testament. And he thinks that almost everything in the New Testament is basically an echo of Old Testament stories. It's all symbolic. And what the heck was I going to say? So it's wild seeing him debate William Lane Craig, because this guy, Shelby Spong, doesn't even believe that there was a physical resurrection. That's how figurative his approach. Yet he still wears the white collar, and at some point I'm like, what the hell are you even believing? And I mean, I'm glad to hear it's kind of. That's funny when you have mixed feelings about kind of wishy-washy cafeteria Christians. Because on the one hand, I'm glad they're talking sense, and I'm glad they're not believing in all this superstitious stuff, literally. But after a point, it's like, what are you even hanging your hat on anymore? Why are you even bothering? You know?
Yeah. I met William Lane Craig once. He did a debate in Ireland with my friend Michael Nugent, who's the chairperson of Atheist Ireland. I think a lot of his arguments are disingenuous. He brings up the Kalam argument a lot. And he knows the way he describes that isn't entirely true, and how he represents some of the papers that he discusses. But he's a very polished performer as a debater. He's done it quite a few times. The thing I always remember about that debate was in the Q&A afterwards. Someone asked him a question about aliens. What if we discover intelligent life somewhere else in the universe sometime? Wouldn't that kind of erode your faith that the universe is so that we could be created in the image of God and all that stuff? And he basically argued, no, that would be okay because Jesus could get crucified on those planets too. Yes, we had then a 10-minute discussion about how many planets Jesus has potentially been crucified on, which is just bizarre.
Weird space Christians, yeah.
Indeed.
I will say that Nugent, Slade, William Lane Craig, probably harder than Christopher Hitchens, which is saying a lot for me, trust me. As a big Hitchens fan, he just very tactfully took him down. For a New Englander, even though you're not a Patriots fan, it was very much Brady on his own defense. Nice. Because I've seen it happen to my Pittsburgh Steelers 1,000 fucking times. So, yeah. Just saying.
Yeah, and I think
not that I'm irritable about it at all, but yeah.
Like I won't curb stomp William Lane Craig. You know, I won't really go to town on him. I try to be a nice guy, but yeah, I think he is intellectually dishonest. Whether or not he knows how intellectually dishonest he's being, I don't know. I feel like he really does view himself as a champion of the faith, and I think he is a believer, but somehow justifies using sophistry and all these kind of rhetorical tools to try to reach the end goal, even if it's
I quite agree. And he's extremely popular within the faith community. His books sell extremely well. I know at the debate that I was at, the vast majority of people who turned up to see William Lane Craig. So he's an incredibly popular guy. The other religious apologist who I'm learning something about recently is Ben Shapiro. He was on Sam Harris's podcast recently. You didn't catch that?
No, well, I was gonna say, I'll probably say screw the news story. I was talking about how we might rip on news stories, because this is something I wanted to talk to you guys about, actually.
Okay.
A good friend and listener of the show. And I say that all the time about my listeners. I call them friends and listeners, and I sincerely mean that about the listeners who reach out to me, constantly give me feedback, interact with me. I do feel like they're really my friends. And one of them, Nathan Randall Shapiro, just made it known to me. I mean, I stopped listening to Sam's Waking Up podcast. I was maybe felt like 3 episodes behind. And he said, did you see the debate between Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro on religion? And I'm like, what? Really? So I went and listened to it. And Ben Shapiro has a huge YouTube presence. And I'm a YouTube junkie. So, I mean, he's infinite. I know who Ben Shapiro is. And I thought, my impression was that both Weinstein and Shapiro a couple of times knocked Harris back on his heels or cornered him, but not because they were factually right, but because of the kind of the aggressive nature of their debating style or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think Sam Harris is a laid back, pretty nice, like mild-mannered guy.
Yeah.
All that. But yeah, so I thought there was a few times when they kind of made him look bad, but not because they were right. They were just more aggressive and forceful with their arguments. But I didn't really hear either of them make any good arguments for religion, I don't think.
Yeah, I have to agree. So actually, let's come back to that discussion. But if you don't mind, could I ask you a question about podcasting in general, Phil?
Sure.
So Sam Harris has brought something up which relates exactly to the point that you were just making, and it's something that Seamus and I discussed before, which is to what degree are you, if you have a guest and you're having a discussion, to what degree are you supposed to kind of ask questions and like let listeners make their own minds up? Or if somebody says something batshit crazy, at what point do you jump in and aggressively point out exactly how crazy this person really is? So Sam Harris has talked a few times, and he mentioned it before the Shapiro article, the piece you might have picked up. He's trying to walk the line between, how many things do I let slide just because, hey, I'm the host? And at what point do you jump in and argue? Because I remember Dan Arrell we had on, Seamus, and I think we disagreed with an awful lot of what Dan Arrell had to say.
Who was the author, the doctor that was a Christian with the scientism?
Yes,
I can't remember his
that
name
as well.
Does he write for Patheos? I'm not sure.
Yes, Dan Arrell, he was one of the advocates of punching Nazis.
Antifa.
Yes, he's an Antifa guy. Yeah, so so we had that discussion at the time, Seamus. So at what point do you ask questions and let your guest talk? And I think sometimes it's a good idea to let them talk, because the more they do, the more they kind of hang themselves. So you can just give them some rope. But yeah, I find it difficult sometimes, Phil. Have you ever come across that dilemma?
Well, I've only done a handful of interviews, and I actually got kind of chastised or scolded by listeners because I tend to be an enthusiastic, easily excited guy when I'm talking about things I'm passionate about type of guy, and I can be long-winded. And so I kept hearing the complaint that you're kind of monopolizing the conversation, or maybe too eager or quick to butt in when you think of something you want to say. Speaking with you guys today, I've been very careful to try to let you go, and just out of a sense of courtesy, let you guys finish your thoughts and not step all over you. And I think, and then also, there's time constraints, thinking about how sidetracked you want to get. Like, I know you guys, Seamus rather, brought up the God that wasn't there and mythicism.
Yeah,
I might have a couple little issues with like the God that wasn't there, or with like Zeitgeist, which I've criticized in the past, or Sicaria, whatever her name is. So I'm on the fence about mythicism. I could easily believe that there was a real dude who got crucified, as many people did, and then they, his followers kind of came up with some story to deal with the fact that their Messiah was a failed Messiah, or maybe a composite figure based on different historical figures. Or I can also easily believe that this was based on neighboring traditions and myths. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, or it could be based on the life of Brian. You know.
Yeah. No,
Right.
yeah, I, mean, so I could go either way. I can see both
Right.
arguments being valid, either based on pre-existing or neighboring myths, like all the different dying and rising gods, or that there may have been a historical guy, but I don't think even if there was that he walked on water or multiplied loaves and fishes. And but I found the approach with some people, like Acharya S. and Zeitgeist, to be a little intellectually dishonest, and they kind of push the envelope too far and try to make connections where they aren't, where they're
Sure.
almost redefining Horus and other mythological figures to fit in the mold of Christ. There's plenty of dying and rising gods. You don't got to do
Right.
that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say with the latter two, definitely there's issues. There's definitely, I wouldn't say dishonest history, but I would say that there's lack of backed history, I guess would be the most kind thing to say. Yes.
I love watching his lectures and debates.
Oh, yeah.
And I know some people view mythicism as being fringe, and I think he's a credit to the movement or the idea,
Sure.
or whatever you want to call it, or the discipline or school of thought, by taking such a well-researched and sober and scholarly approach to it. Like, so, I mean, all that, like the free thought blogs crap aside and all the kind of dirt that's on the online forums and stuff.
Well, yeah, that's
Him as a
but that-
scholar. Him as a scholar,
right,
I really
because that becomes a problem for anybody. And unfortunately, at this point,
Just
you know,
everyone has.
because atheists are eating their own at this point. You know, I mean, and that's a bigger issue, I think, that the atheist movement needs to address. And I'm not saying that just to defend him. I'm just saying in general, that's a problem. I think that his the information he's brought to light is really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dr. Price is also done as well. And I really think this last book, that their last trilogy of books that Fitzgerald has brought to light, is really important. Because the last, if I remember correctly, John, you can correct me when we talked to him, I think it's the last book of his trilogy Fitzgerald did, that it wasn't just the little fictional idea of let's go back in time, be like Back to the Future kind of thing. But he also did like a scholarly idea of, like, you know, investigating why mythicism fails in academia, which is really important because so many colleges are dependent upon funds that come from, you know, Christian-based doctrine and such. So that is an issue for mythicism. But as far as it is a dogma, for me, it's not really a dogma. I just feel that the case has really been met for me. I think at the end of the day that either A, there was never a Jesus, and this was just what it is, you know, what Carrier and such have you know, already put out there enough, or it was such a diluted case of different identities of different messiahs or self-proclaimed messiahs, because at that point, which the documentary Life of Brian did a good job of you're right, of putting forth that yes, this was not an uncommon thing at the time, and that you know, it could have been, we could all sit here talking about why Brian of Bartholomew was not a myth, you know, a real historical person. It doesn't matter. The name doesn't matter. In fact, if you look at the Gospels, it doesn't matter, because they made the point of saying yes, and his name will be called Emmanuel, but we call him Jesus.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Emmanuel, aka Jesus. Moving on.
Yeah, so my take on the mythicist thing is that the argument that Jesus was a historic figure is just as corrosive to the faith as the mythicist argument, because when I've seen, isn't it Bart Ehrman would argue that position, and others, when they get down into the weeds with Price and Carrier and these people, and you pick just to pick one story, you know the story when there's a woman's about to be stoned for prostitution, and they're drawn in the sand. So that's I mean, of all the Bible stories, that one's quite effective and quite nuanced. And I remember I always thought I had this idea that Jesus was drawing the shapes and everyone could see their own sins, but it doesn't actually say that. That's kind of inferred, because it's just a well-written story. But then I think there's even among the people who would promote historicity, there's an acceptance that that's a much later interpolation, and that was added a lot later on. So you end up having Christian apologists. I remember seeing one argument along the lines of that this was a Catholic apologist arguing that, yes, this story was historically accurate. It really did happen. It wasn't in the first versions of the Gospels. It was added later during medieval times when the Holy Spirit inspired some medieval person to add this in. And at that point, when the people defending historicity are asked to defend the Gospels based on the actual historic evidence, even if you don't accept the mythicist position, forcing the apologists to do that can be just as corrosive as convincing someone of the mythicist position. That's, I mean, from having read and watched all the debates, that's my lasting impression from it.
Yeah, and I was going to say one thing in kind of defense of Carrier and mythicism. One thing that I find fascinating, I've wanted to devote a whole episode to, but haven't got around to it yet. And maybe you guys can correct, you might know more than me about this, but it's absolutely intriguing. This idea that there was an earlier Jesus before Jesus. There was this kind of celestial figure that people believed in named Jesus, who existed like, this belief existed centuries before Christianity, I think. And it might have something to do with that whole, isn't there the drama in the heavens that unfolds, this whole kind of celestial or cosmic drama, kind of crucifixion in space or something.
I think it was very ambiguous. I don't remember Jesus' name being officially, and that it was carried like throughout different sects in different regions, and that it was a sacrificial deity that was a celestial being that was kind of like the moon going into the sun as a sacrifice every night to keep us all alive, kind of thing. And then it eventually grew into this something more. And then it was like kind of like a Passover thing, Passover, not literally, as in, generational. That you would add something on to this idea. Well, not only does he fade into the sun, but he also kept so and so from getting killed. It was like that was my understanding of that kind of adoption of it. So
and you can also make the argument that essentially Paul was a mythicist. So weren't Paul's letters written before the Gospels, and Paul doesn't really talk about a historical Jesus who was an actual person who walked the earth. Right. He is describing a celestial Jesus.
And isn't it a somewhat mainstream belief that the Pauline letters predate the Gospels or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then it was docetism, the belief that Jesus wasn't even a corporeal being or didn't die physically. Very strange stuff, and that kind of ties into Gnosticism, which I'm absolutely fascinated with. If I was ever to become a Christian again, I'd want to be a Gnostic. I'd probably either be a Gnostic, a non-theistic Satanist, or a Buddhist. I don't know, but fascinated by Gnosticism.
Buddhism is definitely more interesting than Christianity, if you ask me at this point. So,
or I remember when we talked with Robert Price one time, Seamus, I was telling him that I know one person who's a Marcionite.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's Marcion was he believed that not in the Trinity, that Jesus was God and Jesus came to earth, but that dude has got nothing to do with Yahweh and the Old Testament
Jewish
guy.
God, the evil
Yeah.
That's
Jewish
right.
God.
That's right.
It's kind of like that Gnostic concept of the demiurge, that the God who created this world was like a corrupt and evil kind of
Uh-huh.
imposter God, and that the real true God lies beyond that, and all matter is evil. I
That's
think,
right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But
I,
at
I,
least it has some logic to it, you know. I mean, it's pretty difficult to reconcile, as Robert Price would say, Jesus meek and mild with the Yahweh who smites people at the drop of a hat. So if you believe in the Trinity, you know, Jesus did that. Jesus drowned the whole world apart from Noah. So yeah, it's pretty difficult to reconcile them. So Marcion had something going for him.
Yeah,
I, I,
some
I kind of lean.
low-casteed God makes sense, and it doesn't pin the blame on us either.
Mm.
I kind of go a little further with the H.P. Lovecraft view of kind of like a floating blob, doter, Donald Trump-esque, floating out in space, just farting existence into the void, and here we are.
Oh man,
You know?
I'm a huge
Uh,
Lovecraft fan. I did an
oh yeah.
episode on the Necronomicon around this past Halloween, and I was delighted when I first found out that Robert M. Price is a huge Lovecraft
Oh
fan
yeah.
too. He does
Yes.
Lovecraft.
Have you talked to Price?
I've never interviewed.
Oh,
No.
you got to talk. I mean, he's a wonderful person. I mean, uh, there's a huge gap between me and him and John as far as politically,
Trump.
because yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's unfortunate. And we whenever we talk to the guys on Mythos Milwaukee, we talked about that at length, and it's unfortunate that people want to take that, because somebody. I mean, really, I don't think it was so much. Oh, I love Donald Trump. I was like, as far as Price goes, it was more. I fucking hate Hillary.
Right.
Well,
Mm.
Hillary fan.
I'm on board with you there, brother. I don't like him or her either, but
But Trump.
that doesn't mean I'm gonna embrace him. So I mean, there was a little bit of vibe, but he's still just as a scholar, I don't think. I mean, he's one of those people that, other scholars like. He's probably forgotten more than I'll ever know. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And just as a person, he's a really incredible. He's a really good dude.
He's
So
a geek in I mean the most positive,
Yeah.
loving sense of the word. He's an
Yes.
awesome geek. Just
yes, he is.
big, wonderful teddy bear of a guy who knows just a vast repository of information. It's unbelievable.
And probably the for me, anyways, the best episode, and it might be the best episode as far as we've done, John, is we did a tie-in between religion and comic books, and it was just a back and forth, and just just a bunch of just like literally like it got to like I don't know, John was like looking at me and Robert like you guys are two little kids, just crawling on the floor because I mean it was just like that kind of like adjuration of this is great, you know what I'm talking about, because for I mean to the millennials out there, you don't understand, okay? You couldn't talk about X-Men. You couldn't talk about Spider-Man. You couldn't talk about Iron Man, in high school and stuff without people looking at you like, do you really want to get your ass kicked right now? Because that wasn't cool, dude, okay? Growing up, that was what I was into, I mean, literally subdivisions, Rush, that's kind of like where we were, right? It's just a total 180 now, and to actually talk with somebody that understands that, was just, it was awesome. I'm sorry, I'll shut up now.
Remember the last, interview you guys do with him? I mean, you could see all the
yeah,
ocean of toys up on his
Yeah.
mantelpiece or whatever.
Dude, I got Transfer Z already. How did that happen? Because I'm a little kid, I don't understand. So I want that so bad on DVD. Oh man.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Great Mazinger. Woo. It's supposed to be like a special Shogun Warrior edition where it looks like he's got the blue arms and all that.
Okay, I know this is
I
something.
just showed my dork side.
No. I'm gonna get. I'm with you, man. I'm like up here. Okay, I'm totally erect. All right. So where can we get the old Transor Z stuff? Because I want to know. I want that stuff, man. You know, really.
John's looking at us like, what's going
No,
on?
I tell you, I'm enjoying this for a slightly different reason.
Oh, I'm sure.
Here I've another pendulette-based anecdote to explain why.
Okay.
So I remember there was an interview once with Pendulette when he was asked something about, I can't remember which game it was. It might have been it was a while ago. It might have been Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. But he was asked about the phenomenon of gaming and all these teenagers spending so many hours in front of PlayStations and Xboxes or whatever, and parents getting very worried about that. And he basically said, "Look, shut the fuck up. When I was younger, I was into all this stuff, and my parents tried to tell me, why aren't you listening to classical music? And they just didn't understand that there's a whole world there. And it's the same now. Your kids are playing whatever games they happen to be playing,
Right.
and there's a whole big world behind that, and they're learning about that world, and that's an interesting thing for them to learn about. And it's not your taste or it's not your interest because you're 40 and grey, but just shut the fuck up."
Yep.
So at around that time, I've got 4 kids, and around that time, I had a conversation with my wife along the lines of, why are our kids start talking about fucking Pokemon like a bunch of morons? What is wrong with our kids? And then Pendulette eased my concerns by saying, look, you don't have to understand it. There's just a whole big world there. And that's an interesting thing for them to learn about. So, yes, I'm now very relaxed about all this stuff.
Now that I'm revealing myself to be a geek, I might as well just go whole hog. I think before I came on to talk with you guys, I was playing a game called Conan Exiles on Steam. An open
Conan,
world.
Conan?
Yeah, like the barbarian.
The barbarian, yeah.
It's an open world survival game where you make a character, basically very bloody, very gory. You start off naked on a cross, and Conan cuts you down, and you literally have to scavenge for rocks and twigs and build your own shelter and your own crude weapons. It ends up where you can build massive fortresses, craft steel armor, and other people can kill you and take all your stuff. But
if you're on a cross, was that a hidden message?
What happened?
If you're on a cross, was that a hidden message?
Oh, I don't know. But it's funny because I'm a bit of a Conan geek too. Robert E. Howard, the original, the author of the Conan stories. And Conan was crucified in one or two of the original stories.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Also in the first movie too.
Right.
The Tree of Thulsa Doom has him crucified.
Is this the Arnold movie?
Yeah.
Movie with James Earl Jones. Says,
James Earl Jones, that's right.
Tree of Woe. And he bites the vulture, whatever it is, the buzzard by the neck.
Those are good. Those are really good films. They really were.
That stuff. I love sword and sorcery, fantasy stuff, and sci-fi too. Star Wars, all that crap.
So, are you excited about the new Lord of the Rings stuff coming out, or not?
I didn't even hear about it. What is it?
Amazon is going to do actually episodic Lord of the Rings.
So not a new narrative, just a series version of the same story.
It sounds like some of the similar. I'll never pronounce this right. Silmarillion stories, possibly. Possibly may come out. I'm hoping that's what is actually. Because it's been kind of up in the air as to what the children of Haran, is that, if I'm getting it right, might be one of the starting points. But it's definitely going to happen, I guess. I know that there's been a little bit of playback between the estate of Tolkien. I think, and I could have, again, I could be wrong. I read once upon a time that Christopher Tolkien, who I believe is his grandson, who put out some of the new editions of books and such, that some of the other family fought him afterwards for the estate. So I don't know if this is part of that. I hope not, because I thought he really did a good job of, collecting his grandfather's work and adding to it a bit to make it a more cohesive narrative. So I'm hoping that whatever comes forward isn't without him, because
Was the Silmarillion a posthumous thing? Was that released after Tolkien?
yeah, but it was pretty much, he had put it together. If you've ever looked into Tolkien, wow, what a guy! So
The details
yeah,
behind everything. Yeah.
basically he wanted to have a backstop to his stories before he put his stories forward. And for those who don't know, basically this has been like referred to as the Elfish Bible, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's very Greek ish as far as some of the mythos that and Norse, obviously, because he was very influenced by Grendel and such.
I thought some of the language may have been influenced by
Yeah.
Danish or something like that.
Oh yeah, like Beowulf.
Mm.
He was big on Beowulf and all the Thor and Odin and all those. Basically, this was Lord of the Rings. My understanding was kind of, this guy being an Englishman looking around saying, "Why don't we have our own Odin? Why don't we have our own Zeus?"
Vet too, was it? Wasn't
Yes.
in the war? I think a lot of this stuff.
Which was a lot of what Frodo went through. It was kind of very projective, of the suffering and carrying of the ring and carrying this burden of PSD, basically, which what it was for him. Unfortunately, he was in World War One and talked about extensively about shell shock and which it really was back in those instead of PSD. So, and the whole industrial age coming about was also part of that as right. So I'm a huge Tolkien fan. So
yeah, I think I found out about Tolkien through Led Zeppelin.
oh yeah, yes. Well, don't even talk about Zeppelin, man, because that's my.
That's a. You need a whole other hour for that.
Yeah, that's
Battle of Evermore, Ramble On. All
yeah.
this,
You see all this stuff behind me. Well, unfortunately, my daughter still laments about it. For many, I used to have the object, from Presents, right over here.
Okay.
Yeah, she broke it unfortunately, and she's still upset about it. So yeah, I'm a huge Page fan. I mean, that's the whole reason I pick up a guitar. I can go on forever about Led Zeppelin. That's
The Crowley tie-in. We were talking about Crowley earlier. That's another.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the supernatural or anything like that.
No.
I'm still fascinated by the occult.
Absolutely.
I'm absolutely fascinated by Crowley. I have a whole
okay
on YouTube of Crowley stuff.
Well, that I can talk to you about for hours, and if you want to, we will.
Yeah.
But and I wanted to ask this in our last in the other side of the episode because I think it should be kind of maybe something to explore. John, wink, wink, for questions to ask guests further. So you came from religion, now you're not. If you could make it real, what would any of that mythology or whatever you wish it to be, what would you wish it to be real now that you could actually make it real?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a fucking amazing question. And now I'm thinking about it, I'm like going through my head, okay, this is cool, but I'm like, shit, it's got a dark side too, because I'm thinking about I'm thinking about Norse mythology. I'm like, wow, I can be a warrior, I can live and fight forever. But then I'm like, shit, I gotta fight forever and get chopped up over and over again. And then eventually the Fenris wolf and the fucking Midgard serpent are gonna kill the gods and everything's gonna turn to shit. And it's like, it's like, and then it's like, okay, well, what if just because I want to live forever, let's make the religion of my childhood true, Christianity. Then I'm like, oh, I mean, what's heaven like? What's it mean to live forever? Is that gonna get fucking boring after? I know what I think. Maybe if I had to, I might go back to way back into my pagan Italian roots, or even the Celts. Probably some kind of polytheism. Not necessarily. I think it's weird how Norse mythology has an end. The gods have an expiration date. When Ragnarok comes, everything. And I think maybe it was a later Christian edition, but there's almost like it starts over after the death of the gods, almost like an Adam and Eve type of thing. Might have something to do with Balder, I forget. But what I love about like the ancient classical religion or whatever, about Roman Greek pantheon, is it's so colorful and diverse, and there's a god for like everything, and the gods also are very human. And I think maybe it might be the Greco-Roman gods. Maybe I have a special affinity for Dionysus. I'm a huge Doors fan, huge Jim Morrison fan.
Same here.
Love I can't even explain it. I'm such a devout Doors fan, and Jim was crazy about Dionysus. And then by reading the Doors, I got into like Arthur Rimbaud and Baudelaire and Joseph Campbell and Kerouac and all this stuff, and Nietzsche. And he was big into Dionysus too, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. So maybe the Greek or Roman gods. I might go with that, I think.
But they also had beginning and ends because they had the Titans before them.
Yeah,
right?
One was eating their children and killing their
right. Yeah. So they had to slay the Titans to take over. So there was this kind of did we lose John? Okay, you're still there.
Still here.
Yeah, there's still this bit of attrition through gods as far as the pantheon before the Norse, which although I think the Norse kind of took it to a different level, it was definitely. I'm glad you said that because that is really interesting. So I don't know. Do we all want to bear that cross right now or not?
Well, I've got a quick answer to that. I'll go for Valhalla before Catholic heaven any day. Yeah. So yes, the idea of hanging around on a cloud with Mother Teresa and Padre Pio doesn't seem to hold the same appeal as Valhalla.
I want to see you guys think about this, because this was something that dawned on me, I think, while I started writing that book that I gave up on, that led to the podcast.
Don't let that happen, man.
Don't give up on it?
Yeah, don't give up on it. Don't.
When I was younger, like I was saying, I had those dark nights of the soul where I could think of nothing more terrifying than the idea of there not being a God or a heaven. But then I kind of dubbed it the horror of eternity. And I thought about, how do you wrap your mind around existing forever? That almost seems nightmarish, existing without end.
Yes.
And the only workaround I could think is if there was some safety mechanism that continually kept you in the present and kept you from going absolutely mad. After a while, after what, 1 million years, or probably not even a fraction of that.
Yeah, I remember Hitchens made the same point after he got sick, that he said, he feels like he's at the party and he has to leave early and the party's going on without him. Right. But almost worse than having to leave the party when it's going on without him is the idea that you might be stuck in a party and you can never leave and you can never go to sleep and you have to stay in the same party forever. That's kind of terrifying too.
Imagine even a great party, the type you don't want to end. I'm the type that stays up in parties. I watch everyone go to sleep or leave, and I'm like, where's everyone going? But imagine that. You could never go to sleep, and the party never ended. Stuck there with the same people in the same house or whatever.
Indeed. Yeah, when the Bible describes heaven, or when Christian apologists describe heaven, I always think, look, you really haven't thought this through.
Yeah. I would say twofold on that. The first idea of immortality. There's been some really good vampirical lore written about that. Basically being stuck and bored and just and I can't remember. Yeah, and there was another author, and I can't remember who wrote this idea. Was that basically they almost, as in the vampire, would beg for somebody to kill them because something about the curse that was on them, they couldn't kill themselves. So it was just kind of like you're trapped and you just wanted somebody to kill them. And also the caveat was that that there was only one way to kill that person. Every vampire was different. So they had to wait for somebody to find that one Achilles heel to kill them. And it was, So imagine that being even worse. I remember it as a young age, even sitting around at the dinner table and we were talking about different things and talking about heaven and stuff. I'm like, well, if it's not a challenge, if it's all just what you want, why would I want to go there? And
it's true too. It's like a lot of people, including myself, bitch about the iniquity of this life and the horrors of this life, rightly, I think. But I do think there's something to the idea that suffering lets you draw a contrast to not suffering. You know what I mean? Like it lets you appreciate the good more. I think there is to that, even though I am one of those people who will use the argument of the existence of evil is one of the reasons why I doubt the existence of a benign creator or whatever. I can't really jive reconcile tsunamis and birth defects and all that with a loving God.
Yep.
Can you guys
I quite agree.
Me? You can still hear me?
Yeah,
yes, we can hear you well, Phil.
Video froze a bit, but we can hear you.
Got a little max headroom on you?
That's all right.
I'm spilling rum and coke all over myself. It's okay. I'm getting a bit saucy.
If you drink whiskey, it'd be easier.
Probably. I do drink whiskey. So probably Jack Daniels and Captain Morgan are probably my two favorite things.
We won't hold that against you.
Well, you don't want to know some of the stuff I drink. I'll go to parties and I'll drink shit that would just make you want to shame me for all eternity. Fucking Mike's hard lemonade and fucking I don't even want to say some of the stuff. I've had like female friends tell me I drink like a girl. Some of the stuff I'll drink.
I was gonna say, if you want to check your Mad card, that's fine. It's all right.
I mean, that and the fact that I'm not into sports. I mean, it's not looking good. And the fact, but I got the construction thing.
That's true.
I am painfully straight. So I guess it's kind of like a Fraser Crane thing. I'm kind of like this weird.
Well, you're just one of the guys from YMCA. That's all.
Oh damn! Am I the Indian or which one am I?
No, you're the construction worker.
Oh, that's right. What the hell is wrong with me? Did you have a stash? I don't know how I'd look at a stash.
It's okay.
Shit too, and I like to read, but
it's okay. I don't understand why having some sort of interest in literature and other things makes you gay. Yeah, that makes you gay.
And there's plenty of gay dudes who are in the sports, and there's gay sports players, so you never know.
Right. And again, I don't take offense to it. I have friends and very close family that are gay.
I'm very I have a close family member who's gay too. I'm very pro-gay, very pro-LGBT rights. I always get too tired at the end of that acronym to add the Q. They always add letters,
Yeah. Well, that's okay. They'll add another letter tomorrow. That's my argument. It's like, seriously, I mean, at the end of the day,
it's like more power to you, but what the hell's going on?
Yeah, the LGBT alphabet. It's just like, really, come on. Can we just 3 letters is fine. Just make it simple. Come on, seriously.
It's like as long as you're consenting adults, sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, and that's
the worst thing you can do, according to the evangelicals and others, is give somebody an orgasm. Especially if it's of the same sex. So.
Then, that's another one with the cafeteria Catholicism thing comes in. Oh, the New Testament, this is a new start. We're New Testament people, not, Old Testament people. But when it comes to the gays, often you'll find, that's, we'll still, take a literal interpretation of that or whatever.
Yeah.
Leviticus or whatever. But...
Yeah, but if you read Leviticus, then... let's see. Slavery is okay. Yeah. And going to Red Lobster is bad.
Shellfish can't. No.
Yeah.
Mixed fabrics or whatever.
Right. So
I won't have anything said about Leviticus.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Which one is Leviticus? What's that exact chapter?
It says, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not make tattoo marks on thy skin.
Oh, that is the
Yeah.
best. I love that. Oh my god. And then I think you guys might have been talking about it with Bob Price about. I've always found it fascinating about how it seems like there's these clear rules that seem to be these moral rules. You can't lay with another man, you can't mark your skin, this and that, end of story. But these actually may have been ways that the ancient Jews were trying to differentiate themselves from their pagan neighbors.
Yeah.
I've heard about there may have been gender bending priests and weird fertility cults, and that might be part of the prohibition against homosexuality. So it might not be that they actually thought homosexuality in and of itself is as bad as we interpret them as thinking it is. It could be they were just trying to remove themselves from these neighboring practices. I don't know. I don't know, but still, it's telling you not to do it. So.
Indeed.
It's all excuses. That's all it is.
Yeah.
They just, you put it in print, and it's something you can refer to later and say, I wouldn't do that. It's written right here, right?
Yeah.
I obviously wouldn't do that. So.
I definitely got a glow. I definitely drank a fair amount of booze.
Well, that's because you're a newbie to the show. So this is what we do every time. All right.
Awesome.
Step up to the plate. All right.
Well, you're my kind of guys, man. I don't think I've ever done an interview without drinking.
In fairness, Seamus, I think we've only had one episode where we listened back afterwards and said, no, we can't put that out. We're just far too drunk.
Was that me and you both? That was
both, definitely both of us.
Yeah.
It was just incomprehensible.
It was a year ago. We did a prediction episode. We're like, yeah, let's do New Year's Eve. We'll make some predictions. All right. But I think what really did it in was it went too long. And the longer it went, the more we drank and the more we didn't make sense. It was really bad. Both of us were like, at first it was like, I think part of that episode was really bad. I think some of those predictions might not turn out to be okay. Yeah, I agree with that part. In fact, I would say that some of that episode might have been a little bit diatribe. It might, been a little bit too much, too much of the same. Too much of the same. Yeah. You were drunk. Yeah, I was too. Okay, all right.
That's a scary thing about being inebriated. You feel like you're being charming and that you're being, very well spoken or whatever. Then you'll listen back to it. Holy shit, man. But
I always have this problem where my tongue goes before my brain. So, I can honestly say right now I'm sober. Okay. My tongue though is not. So sometimes it'll catch my hands will too, apparently. It'll catch myself up and I sound like I'm drunk. But I'm really not. I can honestly say that my brain is fine. I am not quite inebriated yet. So
my New England accent always tends to get thicker the more drunk I get.
Yeah, and the other thing is sometimes John will sound more English and I'll sound more Irish. So so it'll kind of play off each other. So, nice. It actually works pretty well for me because, the chicks dig the Irish accent over the English.
It is a good accent. Once in a while I could do an Irish accent, but it's a 50-50 gamble. Sometimes it comes out like an Indian accent. You never know what I'm going to get. It just lilts a little bit, the wrong way. And it is a great accent, though. I love it. So I'm trying to think. I mean, we've been going for over an hour now. I mean, we could talk about one or two more things. It's up to you guys. What do you think?
I'll leave it up to John what we can talk about because he's the one looking at a later time than we are. So.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Well, could I make a suggestion then? It would be great, I think, to talk about a few more issues. So I'm also aware that the listeners might struggle to get through to a 2-hour episode, let's say. So how about we break now and make an arrangement to come back some other day, and we can pick up on those other issues another time.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I had a great time with you guys. I don't see any reason why not to, do this again. Either me
Definitely.
on our show, you guys on this show again, or both. Okay. Well, I've never been this drunk during an interview before. I am pretty drunk.
Success, Seamus. Success. We did it.
Dude, like, fucking.
Whoa! That's a wonderful performance. Well done.
Yeah.
All right.
You did very well. So I think I again I have this tongue thing. It just like it goes. So yeah, I sound much more drunker than I am. I'm just like literally just now like deciding. Okay, I might have had too much. You know what I mean? You get that feeling where your brain, your body is fine, but your tongue goes. That's how I am usually. So
how I am, but right now I'm like.
Oh.
I'm like glowing almost, and I just feel like I feel good, but I'm afraid like I wouldn't be able to talk about something or, respond properly. Okay, well, thanks for coming on, guys, and thanks for having me on the show. It was great.
That was
a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
It was.
And we'll do it again soon.
Did you guys want to plug anything, give any links or anything like that?
Good, John.
No, just the link to the freethoughtprophet.com. I think that's it.
You got anything, Seamus?
That's about it.
Man.
Yeah, just check out the podcast. We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
Both of us are on Twitter. John's at John Hamill 151. I'm sure he'll explain why 151 if you ask him. I'm at the FT Prophet. And whenever I close the show, I always say that the freedom of thought can only be given away, not taken away.
Excellent.
So.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Hopefully we'll do this.
Thank you.
Soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Bye.